Hello and welcome to my presentation for EDFD653. My name is Madeline Ganter, and today the topic that I will be discussing is that of social class and inequality and how it has a major impact upon education. So as teachers, I believe the impact that social contexts have on education is vital to understand, and particularly because I believe that teachers should be particularly understanding of how it affects our students. For me, I found that engaging with Raywin Connell's text Education, Change in Society and additional literature on the topic of social class, that I found that social class and inequality was particularly interesting because of the social class and status that I was raised in compared to that of my parents. So I found that through engaging with this material and learning how social class and inequality do impact on education in Australia, that I was able to develop my worldview on this issue. So my upbringing, I was lucky enough to be brought up in an upper middle class home with two tertiary educated parents, both holding bachelor degrees and who both own and run a successful business within the area of health. For me, these two elements really allowed me to develop an understanding of how important education is for success and being able to attain wealth, power, and status outside of school. It also had an impact on my experience within education, as I attended an expensive private school in the city of Brisbane, had access to tutoring sessions if I struggled at school. I was also able to have two parents who were heavily engaged in my schooling, who took an active interest in my schooling life and who provided me with further academic assistance if required. The upbringing of my parents was quite different. This is primarily because they were both raised in low socioeconomic households, to parents who didn't have much education, who also worked in unskilled menial positions, as they were ranging from driving ice cream trucks or cleaning hospitals. My father did go to a Catholic private school, however, he lacked the academic or support from either his parents or outside sources, as his parents didn't have the academic or educational capacity to help them himself with his schoolwork, or as well as that, they didn't have the financial capacity to provide that assistance to him through another means. My mother faced further inequalities because she did move a number of times during her time within the educational system, which meant that she attended several different high schools or public schools due to her father's struggle to find steady employment. She also was further disadvantaged because her parents migrated from Germany, so not only did they lack educational involvement themselves, they had no experience within the Australian education system and also spoke English as a second language, which meant they didn't have the commandment of the language to be able to provide my mother with academic support within her schooling life. So firstly, I want to talk about life chances, as it is something that I found to be particularly interesting in relation to having an impact on my worldview in relation to social inequality, social class and inequality, as well as giving me a better understanding of how and why my experience would have so significantly been different to that of my parents. So life chances was a concept that was developed by Max Weber. Within capitalist societies, it was determined by Weber's work that the market determined what life chances would be available to an individual to enjoy. In terms of understanding life chances, this is best done in the context of life chances being the possibilities that an individual has for partaking within cultural or economic goods that have been socially created and that are usually existing within their particular society. This can be described in other words as life chances being the probability of an individual gaining access to outcomes that are valued or scarce. Within his work, Weber discussed that a class situation occurs where there is a usual collective likelihood of attaining goods, of attaining a location in life, and discovering or being able to achieve inner fulfillment. This can be described otherwise as members within a particular class sharing the same life chances. So next I want to talk about the work that Weber did in relation to economic classes and social classes. So within Weber's work, a consequence of his recognition of the diversity of assets that are available to individuals meant that it saw a stimulation of the returns within the market and therefore a dramatic increase in the number of potential classes that are available. Weber termed this to be called economic classes. However, that of the social classes within Weber's work tend to be far less numerous than that of economic classes. This tends to be due to the fact that social classes are collections or groups of economic classes. Social classes don't tend to be formed merely on the basis or sole workings of the market. Weber, within his work, really identified the fact that additional elements intervene in the conversion of economic relationships into social classes or social ones. And Weber singled out the notion of social mobility as being an element that required particular attention in this field. Within capitalist societies, Weber proposed that there were four main social groups or social classes, between which social mobility was often rare and challenging for an individual to accomplish. However, it was reasonably common for an individual to be able to move socially within any one particular group. The classes that Weber identified, which you can see on the screen here, are dominant, propertied, and entrepreneurial groups, the petty bourgeoisie, the middle class, or individuals who tend to have a formal qualification, and then the working class. The individuals within the working class tend to not have any credentials and tend to have labour power as being the only asset that they have at their disposal. The notion of life chances and social mobility that Max Weber explored and that I've discussed here have allowed me to be able to reflect on the benefits that I personally have received due to the social class and life chances that I have been able to be granted due to my parents. This has allowed me to develop a worldview that an understanding of how much of an impact social class life chances have on the ability for an individual to be able to participate in education. So, by examining my upbringing and that of my parents, I was really able to understand how much this occurred and being able to comprehend not only that, but also how the Australian education system responds to social influences from the broader community. For me personally, as I attended an upper middle class school and was from an upper middle class family, I found that I was easily able to engage with the Australian education system and be able to have a positive relationship. As my parents' situation was, though, however, based on them being from a lower socioeconomic class, I found that they probably would have had a very different relationship with the education system, as well as their social class and life chances, having a significant impact on their ability to achieve academic success. Whilst both my parents did attain a great deal of success within their lives, it was something that required a large degree of work and was based on their abilities and their hard work alone, rather than for me, for example, where my line or road to success academically and socially was significantly compensated based on my life chances. My worldview was further impacted in relation to the engagement between the Australian education system and social influences, based on reading and engaging with Michelle Broniger's article, What is Driving Curriculum Reform in Australia? For me, this really occurred because within this article, I was able to change and develop my worldview to acknowledge the supreme disadvantage that lower socioeconomic students have within the education system. Moving on from this, educational codes was another element that really enabled me to develop my worldview of how social class and inequality impact upon education and how it affects the relationship between the education system and how it is impacted by social forces. Educational codes were developed by British sociologist Basil Bernstein, and within his work on that topic, he really developed how schools, or the way in which schools act as a social influencer. So within the article on Bernstein's Code Theory and Educational Research by Leanne Causes, I was able to develop this understanding because it pointed out how Bernstein argued how schools act as a social classifier, because schools are a solid independent force on the identity of students in how they are shaped and how they develop their worldview. Education as a social or a key social classifier within society was developed within Bernstein's work based on the fact that it's the primary place where students shape their values and how the primary place in which the practical and intuitive views they hold of the world are shaped. Bernstein argued this through the development of a 3 common message system, which are identified on your screen, of being assessment, pedagogy, and curriculum. This 3 message system works through crafting education as being an agent of socialization and allocation, and through which difference is both constructed and reproduced. Through examining the influence that Bernstein's theory had on educational codes in relation to education, I was able to develop a thorough understanding of how schools, as well as the broader education system within Australia, respond to broader social impacts. I was able to really develop and change my worldview on this through being able to comprehend the way in which these educational codes are fixed within the key elements of education, pedagogy, curriculum, and assessment, and how they preference the individuals that are members of the social class that are in power that develop those 3 facets. This for me really changed my worldview and connection with education as I started to really be able to develop how much lower socioeconomic students are disadvantaged within the educational system, and this really caused me to reflect on my parents' educational involvement and how much they were actually disadvantaged compared to myself, and how my parents have really provided me with the best capacity and ability to be able to attain academic success and as well as success in the future through providing me with my life chances and my engagement. with the educational system. Thank you very much. On the slide, I've just provided the references that I have used within this PowerPoint presentation and in order to develop this presentation. Any information that you would like to achieve, you can have a look at these sources, and they provide a great deal of information on these areas. Thank you very much.